So for me, what I like to look at is, for me, your shin is your vector of force when you accelerate. And so the longer you can keep that shin in a horizontal fashion, the longer you're going to get horizontal force. The more that foot lands out in front of your center of mass, the more you are braking in an accelerative state.
Are you talking about both shins or the lead shin?
So when she starts, she's going to drop that back shin down. But ideally, when you're pushing out of the blocks, you want to get as much of that force going forward. So when she shoves, her shin drops down, even though she starts straight-legged. I'll go back here. But when she drops that knee down, and she rolls all of her weight onto this front leg. Now, she's so strong that she can push everything off this front leg. But when she drives, you can see that that shin is probably at about 25-degree angle there. Whereas some people, they can stay low, but it's really where your shin is pushing where you're going to drive that force. And the term used to describe that is rate of diminishing force. So how long can you keep a horizontal fashion in your acceleration phase? It is one of the three indicators that never fails in describing how fast someone runs. So she extends, she gets this enormous push out. So she's going to hit, and you can see that she is going to step right underneath her hip, which is moving forward, which means she's actually stepping behind her center of mass. She hits, shin drops. She has a rigid foot, so she can press off that. And where she comes forward here, she's going to roll over her big toe. Now, I know she's not actually coming off her big toe, but that's called your forefoot rocker. So if you can't get to your forefoot rocker, which on all of your videos that you showed earlier, Tony, all of those kids can do that, you can drop your shin angle. That without a forefoot rocker, you cannot get a lower shin angle. You can tell kids to get there.
You're saying my kids had a good forefoot rocker.
Uh-huh.
Right.
Because they can drop that shin on their step.
Right.
So here she comes. She's going to scissor her legs through. She's going to hit. And then again, actually on her third step, her shin angle is the same as it was on her first step. So she is still accelerating with no deceleration coming out of the blocks.
Now, am I right that this is very elite, though?
Yeah, she's the top sprinter in the United. Well, before all this happened, she would have been the top sprinter in the United States. She would have been a senior in high school.
Right.
She's going to drive down, the same thing. Now, Tony's right. If she stays low, she can never get that thigh drive. And so when she pushes down with this leg, it's going to enact that spring. And that shin drops again, even on that step. And so she is still accelerating. And how does she win all of her races? This race is over usually within the first 10 meters with her. Nobody can catch her because nobody can keep those shin angles that long to drive forward. So that's kind of what I try to teach. And, I have a 1080, I pull things, and we make some pretty big improvements in how fast they go. So someone asked, what was it before and after? So this is a girl, she runs at Texas. This is our first, and we're not going very far here because it was wintertime. But this is her in her time. You can see power output and the force output, and you can see how much she improved. So by the time that we were measuring here, by her peak velocity was actually a half a meter faster than it was when we started, just by her learning how to pull. And part of the reason why you pull isn't really so much to drag a ton of weight. It's going to be more so you can learn the mechanics of and the timing of getting down and through. So let me pull up a different video here. And by the way, here's when Tony and I did a thing a couple of years ago now, and we did our speed carnival Is that what we called it, Tony? A speed carnival?
Yeah, Speed Fest or something.
Speed Fest. We timed everyone that came through, and everyone pulled on the 1080. And to a T, power output, those are your top 3 fastest people. Speed at 5 meters, which, you know, if you follow Ken Clark, his belief is max velocity and block clearance are the 2 indicators of how fast you're going to run. What was this one here? This is McKenna's changes. Her force, so force is your ability to take a mass from a dead start, which is, she did 52 newtons, she improved, whatever the math is there, I don't do math anymore, that much. And then the power output, she almost improved by almost 80 watts by 5 meters, which converts into this improvement of speed. And really where you get into, if you look at these numbers and it never misses, it's never missed yet, it's really going to be your force per newton. Your force per kilogram and your wattage per kilogram. That will determine how fast you are. That is the one mark in acceleration that is always the determinant. And so I want you to remember that equation, because when Tony and I start to talk about the weight room later on, that is going to come into a major factor of what you're doing in the weight room.
Okay, so if I accept that as being the key, what is the number one thing to change that? Pulling things?
Well, no, there's a million ways to do it, but like let's take you've got to be able to, first of all, let me go back to this one here. I think first thing is you've got to get some kind of push out of the blocks where you're going to move your mass forward. So you're going to get some form of projection. A lot of kids never bring their hips forward. So when she's at toe off, look at how far her hips have traveled before she's even put a foot down on the ground. And if you look at the Japanese research about block clearance, that accounts for 85% of the difference between someone who ran, what was it? I think it was 10.9 down to a 10.2. That just the block clearance alone, that speed out of the hole, is really what was to Nagahara that determining factor. Remember, he had 100 meters of force plate cameras. He had it's a sprint researcher's dream come true. And I'm sure they were disappointed when it came down to, you mean it's all about the block clearance? And if you think about it, if I can get more velocity here at the beginning, I have to spend less time balancing, finding different ways to not fall in the stumble reflex. So think about if you're driving a bike and you get on that bike and you start off really slow, it becomes really wobbly, right? So you're spending half your time zigzagging back and forth while you're trying to get some kind of balance when you're going. However, if you get that big shove when you start the bike, you don't have to spend any time wobbling back and forth. You just get going. The same is going to hold true when you come out of the blocks. I spend all of my time watching acceleration sitting right behind their butt. Because I sit on the 1080, I videotape behind the 1080, and you can see people who don't have the speed, just like on a wobbly bike, you're going to have to stay in the center. And once that foot hits center underneath my belly button, I now have a break. But if I can press out really hard and I can keep my feet to the outside, I'm going to be able to get a lot more velocity with no braking. So when you come out, this is what you're looking for. And so when you belt someone up, I'm not saying you put 1,000 pounds or anything like that on there, but by taking the body weight off of your body and putting it into the machine, you can get to these positions a lot better because you don't have to balance. You don't need the proprioception. The machine becomes your proprioception. And so then as you get better, you actually decrease the weight on the sled. And I know that sounds different than what some people want to listen for, but if you're training someone how to put their body in the right place and gain that stability so you can get there, that's how it goes. It actually goes backwards. So that's how I kind of train it. And so one drill that I did this year before I lost my season, as we all did, this is a 4-foot rocker drill. Again, we aren't using the rubber band to create tension for for Marshall to walk through. The rubber band is taking Marshall's body weight off so he can learn to find forefoot rocker. So when he comes forward, shin drops down, and now his rear heel has to push forward. If I can't get the forefoot rocker, I'm going to actually bail out backwards. And when I go to press on that foot, it would be like jumping off a falling elevator. Because when I go to displace, my weight is now going to, for example, if he bailed on that foot, his weight would displace back into the left instead of forward right in front of him. So people say, well, Korfist is doing all these drag exercises with heavy blue rubber bands. No, the rubber band is his body weight, so he can learn to find this position. And then as he got better, we went to smaller and smaller rubber bands. And then eventually he had no rubber band. And then we made that into kind of a bounding movement.
So really, you're just trying to get into shapes.
I'm getting into shapes. And so my rubber bands and weights serve as a way to take body weight off. It becomes your proprioception. And yeah, I do. I when we need to, we anchor down the 1080 and we make you pull heavy and stuff like that, because I've seen results from that. And you can pretty easily pull up the data. But when we see Marshall come through here, you know, he's got to fall. So he's on his tall, he's going to fall. He loads a spring on that ankle, that right ankle. A little unstable there, rolls through, shin drops. Look at his foot kind of push the side, but he finds it at the very end, rolls through to his big toe. I'm not saying he's on his big toe, but you've got a break there. And now his heel comes forward. And if we watch Samira come through, watch her heels come forward when she pushes. So she'll hit and watch her rear heel come forward. Where with slower people, that gives. There's a give in that heel. And so again, you're pushing off a falling elevator. She hits. Heel comes forward. That's her forefoot rocker.
And that's why you do all of your ankle isos and stuff?
Yeah, because when I hit the ground, I want to make sure you are landing on, for a moment, there is going to be a stiffness, so you don't have a give, but then once that stiffness catches, it's going to roll through and you'll go through your ankle rocker, forefoot rocker, and it becomes a spring. You're actually loading the spring.
Am I right that the number one thing you can do for ankle stiffness is your ISO ankle stuff?
ISO ankle stuff, but again, if you want to weight someone down and make it more sport specific, you know, we'll weight it to the point where you break in your ankle and they'll take it one notch back. So you're actually pushing through with a stiff ankle. So you're trying to create that stiffness to press from. And now the machine becomes it's an ankle workout. It's an isometric ankle workout with movement.